There was the paleo diet, there was the primitive diet, there was the primal diet, there was the caveman
There's
diet.
always a
Stone
hot
Age
new
diet,
weight loss plan that
transition
promises
to
to
the biblical
transform you
diet, the
and your
Eden
life.
diet, the 30-day faith detox, the origin
Invariably,
diet, the Jesus
they're hard
diet.
work.
I have tried all diets on the market. It was too hard, and maybe some can do it, but I can't.
Now, there's something different, a drug.
It's actually an injection in your tummy or in your thighs. I was very scared, but doing it the first time I was okay.
It's been a tremendous effect on my health.
But at what cost?
That's a lot of money you have to find extra, especially when you're a family with 3 small children.
I connected weight loss to happiness, and that's just not the case.
This is The Food Chain from the BBC World Service. I'm Ruth Alexander, and this week we're finding out what it's like to take the new weight loss drugs and what they could mean for dieters and the multi-billion-dollar diet industry.
They're not a threat. They're not an existential crisis. They're wow.
I first heard about it, I think it was in August 22. I was at the pharmacy and the pharmacist was very skinny all of a sudden. And I asked her, what's your secret? And she said, oh, I'm on this drug called Ozempic. So that was the first time I heard about it. And actually, I think it was the day after I called the clinic and got a meeting.
This is Michelle Heerham, a makeup artist and mother of 3 who lives in Denmark.
I have struggled with my weight for many years, actually since I was a child. And I have tried all diets on the market, I think. And some of them is effective, but you have to be so strict to follow these diets. And in some point, you get to a point where your weight isn't losing that fast. And then my patience stops, because when your head is always spinning around food and thinking about food, then it's hard to maintain, the backbone. It was too hard, and maybe some can do it, but I can't.
So what were you thinking when you got the appointment at the clinic about the weight loss drug?
First, I was a bit ashamed.
Why?
Because people are looking at overweight people with okay, you are just lazy, just go for a run, then you'll lose weight, obviously. But then I met a nurse who could understand me and who could see my problem. And she said, you're not alone. This is a very common problem.
Michelle was given a private prescription for a drug called Wegovy, made by Danish pharmaceutical company Novo Nordisk. It comes in a preloaded pen and you administer it yourself.
Well, it's actually an injection in your tummy or in your thighs. I feel like a very big deal doing the drugs the first time. The needle is very tiny. But still, I have never injected myself with anything before, so I was very scared. But doing it the first time, I was okay. I couldn't feel anything, almost. So it didn't hurt at all.
What change did you first notice as the medication started to take effect?
The first changes I noticed was that I felt like I was in the first trimester of a pregnancy. I had nausea, I was tired, and I had a headache. My doctor then said, remember to drink a lot of water. And I did, and then the nausea became less and the headache was gone. And I didn't feel tired anymore. But still, if I eat fatty food or a lot of bread, then I can feel nauseous again.
What happened to your appetite?
I think within 2 weeks, my appetite almost didn't exist. I was struggling to make dinner to my family because I didn't have any urge for food. So I have to have my boyfriend telling me, oh, I want pasta tonight. Because I feel like that, because I couldn't have the feeling of, okay, I would like to have that.
And what's it like having little appetite?
It's so refreshing to not be tamed by your appetite. I eat half of what I did before. Now I have my little helper who is Wegovy, who is taking my hand and, making the portions smaller, and who's making my head calmer around food.
To date, Michelle's lost 12 kilograms. The medicine she's taking is one of 2 injectable weight loss drugs taking the world by storm. Based on a medicine for treating type 2 diabetes, Wegovy went on sale for weight loss in 2021. The other, made by US pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly, was approved in late 2023. Already, millions are on them. And with around 1 in 8 people living with obesity, according to the World Health Organization, there are many more weight loss drugs in development. So how do they work? I asked Naveed Sattar, Professor of Cardiometabolic Medicine at the University of Glasgow in Scotland, who does clinical work in the National Health Service and is chair of the UK government's obesity mission. I should mention he's done paid consultancy work for the 2 big players, designing clinical trials and doing educational talks. The fees are paid to his university.
So these drugs provide extra amounts of a hormone that we normally make in the gut in response to food. That hormone is called a glucagon-like peptide, or GLP-1 receptor agonist. And that hormone actually helps the body make more insulin to help target the sugar into the right parts of the body. But it also signals into the brain to increase the feeling of fullness, i.e. satiety, so that in essence leads people to eat less food than they would otherwise. The other effect that the drug has, or these molecules have, is that they also slow how fast your stomach empties. And the net effect is you feel satiated quicker, you have a feeling of fullness with a lower intake of food, and therefore you eat less calories and you lose weight.
And do you have people in your own clinic on these drugs?
I did the clinic 2 days ago, and I had several patients in whom I would like to prescribe the drugs. But you've got to remember, Ruth, that the number of people who prescribe these drugs in the NHS has been very small. In fact,
How small?
Oh, it's less than 200 patients, and up until about a month ago, or
That's hardly any.
Yeah, no, it's hardly any, because the vast majority of sales have gone through private pharmacies or other places. But every week when I do the clinic, I often have probably a third of my patients where I think these drugs may have substantial benefits for those patients.
Who do you think would benefit from the medication?
Many people are living with 2 or 3 or 4 conditions linked to excess weight. Not only do they have excess weight, they have conditions linked to it. As an example, I may have a patient in the clinic who has, for example, pre-diabetes, so he's on the way to developing diabetes, which is linked to obesity, who may have sleep apnea, excess fat within the liver, high blood fat levels, hypertension, and is developing joint pains because he's carrying excess weight, which is putting pressure on his joints. So there you have an individual where if you were able to give that individual sustained weight loss, they may have multiple benefits on multiple health systems that substantially improves the quality of their life.
And what kind of weight loss typically can someone achieve on these drugs?
We're now seeing patients who are able to lose somewhere between 15% to 25% weight loss. So that, in a sense, could take somebody who has got, for example, a body mass index well into the obese range, BMI of 35, back down almost to normal, under 25 with these drugs, which is remarkable.
And for patients, potentially life-changing.
It's been a tremendous effect on my health, on my well-being, on my mental, emotional well-being. I feel like more. Of course, the weight loss is amazing.
This is Ekta from Texas in the US. Her doctor prescribed Mounjaro, manufactured by Eli Lilly 2 years ago. She's now 23 kilograms lighter.
I remember that I could never wear heels, right, because of my weight gain. My feet used to hurt. They looked like kind of swollen all the time. More than anything, I think it's my self-confidence. For the 2 or 3 years that I had the weight, I used to go on vacation. I told my husband, please don't take pictures of me. Or I'll not, stand here with the family. You take it with the kids, kind of thing. So I just didn't like what I saw in the mirror. I just could not look at myself. And so once I started taking the drugs, it was a tremendous boost to my self-confidence.
What changes have you noticed in terms of what you eat and how much you eat? Can you give me an idea, like what, say, I don't know, like say a bowl of pasta?
Close to only half a cup of pasta, cooked pasta. That's what I can have. And I'm Indian.
That's not much, is it? That's a really small portion.
That's really small portion. So our food staple is, we need to have our rotis or the tortillas every meal. So in the beginning, when I started taking Mounjaro, I had to substitute a lot of it with rice, which is lighter on the stomach.
Do you experience any side effects?
So the common side effects in both Ozempic and Mounjaro is constipation. I do take magnesium supplement 3 times a week at least. I've read that that particular side effect can be serious in a lot of people who use these shots. For me, touch wood, it has not been as severe where I've had to be going to the hospital or anything like that. But I've heard stories that can become pretty drastic.
Common side effects also include short-lived nausea and diarrhea, stomach pains and headaches. For most people, they're manageable, but the medicines don't suit everyone, as Emily Wright in Toronto, Canada, discovered.
I had recently been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and so my doctor started me on Ozempic, and the goal was to put my diabetes into remission.
So this was all about diabetes, not about weight loss?
Weight loss was just a benefit of the drug, for me anyway.
This was in 2018. The drug Emily was prescribed was a version of today's weight loss drug Wegovy. Back then, it was only approved for the treatment of type 2 diabetes, although its ability to bring about weight loss was already well known.
I definitely saw my blood sugars within the first month drop and get lower on the daily basis. Definitely also connected to the amount I was eating and how often I was eating. So I think I was full of hope within the first month.
Emily also began to get headaches and nausea, which over time got worse.
Within sort of a year, I was starting to vomit daily. I would wake up and vomit undigested food.
Oh, goodness.
The food that was sort of sitting in my stomach overnight, and then in the morning, I would vomit, my last meal up. And then I would sort of get on with my day. However, one thing that really started to happen was I had these disgusting smelling sulfur burps to the point where my husband didn't even want to sit beside me watching television. And as a teacher, I'd go to school and I would be making these incredibly stinky burps, and the kids were, "Where's that? What is that? Where's it coming from?" And I was very embarrassed because, normally those sorts of things are from the children. And here I was as the adult in the room sort of trying to cover it up that it wasn't me.
She was eventually diagnosed with gastroparesis, or stomach paralysis. It's a condition that can be caused by diabetes, but Emily says a specialist told her that in her case it was likely caused by the medication. She came off it.
I didn't get better. It's been almost 2 years now of, vomiting up to 200 times a week. I've developed episodes of what we refer to as cyclic vomiting syndrome, where the vomiting is not able to stop. It's almost like a cycle. And I normally end up in the emergency from dehydration. That's sort of when I realized that this was really serious and that I had stayed on this medication far too long. And, now I had caused what could be permanent damage to my system.
So you can't prove that it was this drug, but you strongly suspect it was?
Correct. I don't have a way, again, I could also point out, Ruth, that we never had done a gastric emptying study before. So I still don't know what my motility level was before starting Ozempic. Perhaps I was already somewhat slow and the Ozempic just, put me over the top. I don't know that scientifically, but I do know that before the Ozempic, I did not have GI issues.
Emily lost 36 kilograms, or 80 pounds, on the drug, a quarter of her body weight. She thinks that's why she persisted with it for so long, despite feeling so ill. If you could travel in time back to 2018 and speak to your former self before you went on the medication, what would you say to yourself?
I think that I would, remind myself that weight loss isn't everything, and that loving your body for the way it is isn't a bad thing. And I connected weight loss to happiness, and that's just not the case. I'm, sicker than I've ever been in my life. As I've explained, it's sort of changed every aspect of my life. And I would love to go back in time and sort of tell myself that it's okay to be who I am and that weight loss isn't everything. But I'd really like to go back and practice being kinder to myself. Like, why didn't I connect the Ozempic earlier? Why didn't I push for that? And I think it's because I was so blindsided by the fact that I lost 80 pounds.
Emily Wright. I asked Professor Sattar about the risk of severe reactions.
The downsides, of course, is that these drugs are not for everyone. A small proportion of individuals find them exquisitely sensitive to the drugs, that they get levels of nausea and vomiting that they do not wish to have, and they will stop the drugs.
Gastroparesis isn't listed as a side effect by the drug manufacturers, but researchers are investigating it.
Yes, and I think that's something that we do need to keep vigilance on, and we need to look at what the effects on gastroparesis are when patients are on these drugs for 5 to 10 to 15 years. Gastroparesis is a very rare condition, so I think the trials have not been powered enough to be able to see that. What we need to do is just maintain vigilance over time. As these drugs are more widely prescribed into communities, we look at real-world evidence to look for those signals. Even then, if those signals say, whatever the number is, if it happens, say, 1 in 10,000 or whatever, we need to weigh up the benefits against risks. And we do that for all sorts of drugs.
The manufacturer of the drug Emily was taking, Novo Nordisk, told us it's continuously monitoring the safety profile of all its products and working closely with health authorities around the world to ensure patient safety. It says anybody who believes they may be experiencing a side effect or adverse reaction should speak to their healthcare professional. The company also told us this type of drug has been used for a number of years and that more than 25,000 participants have been exposed to its drugs in its own clinical studies. The other big manufacturer, Eli Lilly, told us that patient safety is its top priority. Another reason weight loss drugs aren't an option for everyone who wants them is their cost. Professor Naveed Sattar says they could mean a huge expense for the UK's National Health Service.
If we were able to prescribe this drug to everybody who would be recommended, it would be a substantial number of individuals, perhaps 6 million people. The cost of these drugs is such that could cost 5 to 10 to 20 billion pounds a year, which is substantial. Now, what we don't currently know is what are the actual savings by giving these drugs. We know that, for example, that you can prevent heart attacks and strokes. We know that you can reduce liver fat, improve lipids, blood pressure. What we haven't really worked out is what's the net benefit in terms of cost saved versus the net costs, and how do these weigh up?
Do you ever come across in your work colleagues or just other people that you're speaking to who say, this is a waste of money and it's a waste of research effort, this isn't something that should be invested in?
It's not do I ever. There's lots of doctors and healthcare professionals who still say, listen, we shouldn't be using these drugs. It's a lifestyle choice. It's not a lifestyle choice. It's not a lifestyle choice. Why would 30% of the population want to be living with obesity? Why would they? It's hard.
Do you tell other people that you're taking the drugs, that this is how you've lost weight? Hector in Texas again.
So it's selective. If I have a friend who's trying and who has been trying like myself to lose weight, then yes, I do tell. I feel no shame. If it's just, people meet at a party and say, hey, you look so good, you've lost so much weight. Thank you. I've been working hard at it. And I have.
Do you worry that you might get negative reactions from other people?
Yes, I do see sometimes disapproval, but I really don't care because, it doesn't matter to me. You do you and I'll do what makes me feel good, really. That's the way I think everybody should look at it.
You're listening to The Food Chain from the BBC World Service. I'm Ruth Alexander, and this week we're talking about weight loss drugs, what they mean for dieters and diet culture.
There was the paleo diet, there was the primitive diet, there was the primal diet, there was the caveman diet, there was the Stone Age diet. I transitioned to the biblical diet, the Eden diet.
This is Adrienne Bittard, a historian of food and nutrition at Cornell University and author of Diet and the Disease of Civilization, an analysis of 150 years' worth of diet books.
The 30-day faith detox, the origin diet, the Jesus diet, and then finally the detox diet, which is sometimes called clean eating today. You can think of the lemonade detox that Beyonce did, the master cleanse.
And then there's the idea of achieving weight loss through drugs. How new is that?
It is not new. Diet drugs have been around, in the United States at least, for nearly 100 years. As early as the 1930s, there was a drug called dinotrophenol, which caused blindness and death in some dieters. In 1938, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act did ban many of these drugs, but still common remedies were readily available. There were thyroid hormones, amphetamines. They were popular as appetite suppressants well into the 1960s. But the most prevalent example of this in recent memory is the tragedy of fen-phen in the 1990s.
A combination of two drugs, fenfluramine and phentermine, which was hugely popular in the US until it was discovered it could cause potentially fatal heart valve defects and was withdrawn. This checkered history leaves some people doubtful about the new generation of weight loss drugs. Adrienne says others make a judgment that's deeper rooted.
In American culture in particular, but also in Western culture, there is these leftover religious ideas that penitence and repentance and suffering is sort of good for our soul. It's like a muscle that you exercise. The more you understand your frailty and work on yourself, very much the self-help narrative, the stronger you'll become. The idea of taking a quote-unquote magic pill is derided as a shortcut, as a cheat, that instead of doing that hard work on yourself and sort of paying your respect to this sort of altar of diet and exercise and restriction and suffering, you're taking the easy way out and often paying your way into a shortcut. And as we know, it's not a shortcut. It comes with its own host of complications and challenges. But there's a general cultural idea that we need to sort of work on ourselves and work on our body, and relying on a pharmaceutical isn't doing the same work that we all as human beings need to do to ensure our health.
Adrienne Bittart. Making profits out of these attitudes have been the diet companies, forming a multi-billion-dollar industry out of helping people count their calories and watch their waistlines. So where did the new generation of weight loss drugs leave them? One of the biggest names, Weight Watchers International, saw revenue from subscriptions fall 15% in the year following the US's approval of these drugs for weight loss use. The company is now offering the medicines itself.
Introducing Weight Watchers Clinic.
Our team of doctors will help you find the right medical weight loss plan, including medications if appropriate, with ongoing support from our
With the loss of its star board member, Oprah Winfrey, who left to have the freedom to talk about the weight loss drugs she herself is taking, its share price hitting all-time lows, and a sizable debt to manage, I asked the company's chief scientific officer, Gary Foster, whether the new GLP-1 medicines, as they're known, are upending diet culture and putting companies like his in jeopardy.
I don't see it that way. I think that what we have done and what happens in the weight management category over time is that there are new therapeutic developments. And I think companies that say, oh, we're not going to do that. We're just going to say, no, our way's the best way and we don't need to adapt, we don't need to evolve, will, go the way of Blockbuster.
A leading video and DVD rental chain that went bust after being blindsided by online streaming businesses.
We believe quite differently that as consumer insights and particularly as science changes, these new treatments are to be celebrated. They're not a threat. They're not an existential crisis. They're, wow, here's a really powerful tool that we could put in the toolbox and it will be appropriate for some of our members. And that's great news. And I think what it does for companies like ours, maybe to your point, is to rethink, okay, what's the role of behavior change in the context of very powerful medications that reduce appetite?
Will you be offering people on the medication different advice around eating?
Very different advice. And the reason for that is based, again, on what we listened in the first year. We interviewed over 1,000 people on GLP-1 medications, and they said a couple things. One was that they really needed help with getting better nutrition. While they liked their reduced appetite and they liked their large weight losses, they knew and had a greater desire for learning more about nutrition and particularly protein. And what we often heard is, my doctor told me I should eat more protein, but I don't know how to do that. Where in our typical program, that protein is in the background, but we made it front and center, and we made it a primary target. Our traditional program spends a lot of time on when you go to a restaurant, how do you navigate the menu? How do you navigate dessert? What about the bread on the table? All those things. That's not an issue for people on GLP-1s. It's getting adequate nutrition. A final distinction is that while activity is important, whether you're on medications or not, strength resistance training is particularly important for people who are losing large amounts of weight. Videos on that, instruction for beginners, all of that is part and parcel of our GLP-1 program that's specific for those on these medications.
Oprah Winfrey recently presented a special on weight. It was sponsored by Weight Watchers, and she acknowledged her own role in promoting the diet industry.
I know we've been criticized, we've been scrutinized, we've been shamed, and we've been told that unless we meet a certain standard of size, that we didn't deserve to be accepted or even to be loved. And what I know for sure is that I am done with it. I'm done with it. I'm done with it.
As a key player in the diet industry over the years, does Weight Watchers owe people, their members, former members, an apology for being part of that?
I think it's important to separate out science-based, proven ways to manage your weight and the diet culture. I think they're separate things. Having said that, we do have to own our part in creating diet culture because we're a part of the culture. And I think some things that we have done in the past, we have changed because, again, good companies evolve over time. I'll give you an example. When people 10, 12 years ago used to join our program, we would assign them a goal weight. In retrospect, that fed into a diet culture, and it wasn't consistent with the science. That just because you have a particular height doesn't mean you should have a particular weight. That's where the field was at the time, and we take ownership of that decision at that time. But we also, when we know better, we do better. And now when people come into our program, we don't assign goal weights. So that's an example of, yes, I think we contributed to diet culture. Have we in the past emphasized, for example, pre-post pictures more than changes in mindset and changes in health? Yeah, and we've changed that. Diet culture says a lot of nasty things that we've never said, like your weight is your worth, that this is all based on willpower, that this is about discipline. None of that is part of the Weight Watchers culture.
How key are weight loss drugs going to be in the business in the future? What's the goal?
We haven't been public about any goal, and I think, again, as a nimble business, we will adapt as the market adapts. I don't have a crystal ball, but...
Will they be central?
I have my eye on the pipeline of medications, and there are at least 3 or 4 that look very, very powerful, either equal to or better than the current portfolio of medications. So I think the degree to which they become central will largely be an access issue. Right now, the therapeutic promise of these medications is inspiring, awesome, game-changing, but it doesn't have a real impact until people can get broad access.
Gary Foster. And that clip of Oprah was from a virtual event, Making the Shift, broadcast on the Weight Watchers website. For many, having access to the drugs would have to mean for life, because when patients stop taking the drugs, their appetite returns, and they typically regain 2/3 of the weight they've lost. I wondered how Ekta in Texas feels about that. She's now reduced her dosage to maintain the weight loss she's achieved.
I'm on lower dose, and I am doing alternate week, every other week. So it does keep me a little bit hungry, but I don't mind it because I can afford to gain a little bit weight. So yeah, basically that's the kind of maintenance I am on.
So when you come off the drug and a full-blown appetite returns, how are you going to manage that? Have you thought about that?
Who said I want to come off the drug? I tell everybody, everything is lifelong. It does not matter whether your diet and exercise, calorie control, Weight Watchers, or the shot. Everything has to be lifelong. It's a lifestyle change. You choose what suits your body type and your goals the best, where you can achieve, what you want with the least side effects.
Ekta's medicine is covered by her medical insurance. Michelle in Denmark, however, pays $200 a month for her private prescription.
So that's a lot of money you have to find extra, especially when you're a family with 3 small children.
Does it feel hard to justify? Is that what you mean?
No, I don't think it feels hard to justify it because I also do it for my children's sake. If they don't have a healthy mother, if they have a mother who maybe died before time because she's overweight, or a mother who can't play with them on the ground, I don't think that's good for kids. So it's also for their sake that I'm doing it. My plan for maintaining the weight loss is that I, of course, have to change my lifestyle in this process. Of course, this is an investment for me and an investment that I have to work with after being off the drugs. This is my motivation to maintain my weight loss because it's very expensive to be on this drug, but it's working, and it's the one thing working for me.
Would you say that the drug has changed your relationship with food?
Yeah, food was something bad in my head. Now I'm like, if I want chocolate, if my body craves chocolate, I give it chocolate, but not in that amount that I used to before. And I don't feel bad about it because I know it's okay to have 2 pieces of chocolate. So my head is more calm about it now than before. And I just find peace in eating food.
Michelle Herum in Denmark. Thanks to her and to everyone we've spoken to for today's programme. What's your experience of weight loss and diet culture? You can email thefoodchain@bbc.co.uk. If you enjoyed this programme, do take a listen to Business Daily from the BBC World Service. Adrian Murray is looking at the impact of Novo Nordisk on the Danish economy, and Liana Byrne is finding out how these drugs have changed Big Pharma. From me and the rest of the team, Beatrice Pickup and Rumela Dasgupta, thanks for listening, and join us again next week.